All right, guys, we're back with part 3 of the 100K call system series, where we're going to cover best in class or industry leading software. Now, just like data, this is where we also set our agents up for success, right? Before they're even making a call and doing their work, this step is so crucial in making sure we're setting our agents up to have high connection rates, high contact rates, no lags in calls dropping or productivity being impacted, and also just being able to monitor our agents at scale. So systems, and specifically power dialers, are a monumental piece in running a successful cold calling campaign. So we're going to get into all of that today, team. Now, I want to level set, right? Same way we did in the data session. Software is also equally as expensive. Software is also complex, and it's always changing, and it's always innovating. So we always have to continue to stay on top of the new emerging features that are coming out and the tools that we're leveraging, or if there's a new way of doing an already existing technology that we have an investment in, where we could be replacing that and ultimately doing a better or more efficient job. And so we're constantly having to review our tech. If not on an annual basis, you should be doing it on a quarterly basis. Because what it does allow you to do is software is actually going to enable your business to ultimately scale up your deal flow. Again, it doesn't necessarily close your deals for you, but what software does do is it helps you scale your deal volume month over month. And so we're going to get into that. So think about this as we're going forward, and as you're preparing for your cold calling campaigns, which tool and software providers make the most sense to partner with based on your budget and what you're looking as far as outcome or ROI in your campaigns. So a couple things we're going to hit on. First is just going back over the 100K call system hierarchy and where systems play a key role. Then we're going to go over the power of power dialers and dialer maintenance best practices specifically, so you guys can avoid some of the hiccups and challenges that I had when I first kicked off my campaigns and really had to become a full-time tech person overnight. So I'm going to help you avoid all that headache. And then we're going to get into some complementary tools that we use to automate and scale our cold calling marketing engine, and then how you can start thinking about cold calling compliance, as this is becoming a big topic of conversation in 2025, and we have a lot more to come on that in the future sessions. So let's go back to the hierarchy, right? The three-pronged approach to creating this 100K call system starts with premium data, then it goes into best-in-class software. Now, at the third and final piece, which will be our part 4, is our A-layer talent. However, today, like I said, we're going to focus on best-in-class tools that are going to help us get better productivity from our agents and improve our cold calling campaigns. And it starts with the number one tool in our toolbox, or let's say our tech stack, which is our power dialer. Okay, this is a must-have tool that we need to implement or ingrain into our business, whether that's buying it and setting it up and putting into your business on your own, or partnering with a third-party group like the DIY Real Estate Group that has this system already set up for you. So next, a crucial tool that we have is Zapier, which we've talked in previous sessions. Then going into data analysis and reviews and leveraging just the Google Sheet setup and Google Studio integration to be able to see colorful reporting. So bare minimum tools in order to run a 100K call system. So it's not that expensive, and it's really, you can keep a pretty light overhead wise, a light department for cold calling, which is great. So let's go back to the two approaches to cold call marketing. You got the spray and pray approach, or the spray approach, where we look at that as a numbers game. As you're familiar, this is where I'm most comfortable. And then you have the sniper approach, right? The quality over quantity play. And so what are the differences between these two as it relates to cold call marketing specifically? Well, the spray approach is marketing to large data sets, typically using a power dialer that's running 3 to 5 lines at a time. I know some dialers that can get up to 8, maybe even 10 lines if you're doing over 100K records, right? But typically what you're going to run, especially if you're just starting out, is anywhere between 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 lines. And that just always comes down to how much volume of records you're targeting, or how big is the volume of data that you're targeting, So what this does require, though, is more dialer maintenance, right? The higher the volume, the more activity, that naturally it requires a lot more time and attention to detail on your dialer. This does increase your software costs, more phone numbers you have to purchase that you're recycling, more dialer seats that you have to gather for your agents. So when you're looking at the spray approach, this certainly is the more expensive route because you're doing a much larger volume of marketing and a larger data that you're ultimately going after. So that impacts your data costs, your list building costs, etc. Now, the sniper approach is the approach that also can be taken, and you can still use a power dialer to do this. You can just basically throttle this down to a single line dialer, or you can just choose to manually call each lead at a time. But naturally what you're doing here is we are marketing to a highly targeted subset of data in our target market, meaning this could be only vacant properties or only pre-foreclosures or only auction or bank-owned properties, right? Just some sort of highly motivated or highly distressed data set that we're targeting. And naturally that data comes few and far between in any given market. So you're going to want to take a different type of approach to outreach. So what's the cause and effect of that? Well, you're going to, of course, have less dialer maintenance. You may even not need a dialer depending on how many records you're targeting. But if you're just doing a single line dialer, which I do recommend, even for small targeted data sets, you're still going to have less TLC, less attention, and probably less hiccups related to your dialer because you're just not doing as high volume. And then that also will impact a lot lower software costs, less phone numbers you have to purchase, less dialer seats you have to worry about. And so there's good and bad from both. As you're well aware, this is my approach to marketing, but as I'm even exploring more ways to attack my target market in the new year, my business partner, which is my brother, and I are figuring out a campaign strategy to mix in both. And so more education and more trainings and stories to come in the new year on that. So for those that aren't familiar with power dialers, it is a software that we use. Typically, it can be a very expensive piece of software, but it's a crucial piece to increase the efficiency and productivity of our outbound calling process. They're often used by sales teams, but they're not just for real estate. Right? You can use them for all industries, but certainly designed for hitting your target clients or target market at scale through sales or client success groups. And so it is designed to typically target large volumes or make large volumes of calls way more effectively and automating that process. And so there's really two different options you have when you're going into starting your business or scaling your business. I like to think of these as your enterprise dialer companies. These are Ready Mode. That's actually who we use now. We really like Ready Mode. We're excited at the innovations they're making in the new year as we're seeing changes in compliance. Call Tools, another great company. We actually started our business with Ready Mode first in 2021. Realized it was too big for the size company that we were at. I think we had less than 5 agents, so then we shifted to Call Tools. And then when we started to get up to 10 agents, 15 agents, we decided to migrate back over to Ready Mode because we just had too many. We really needed to get to a better enterprise or call center style dialer setup. And then there's Ring Central and Five9, which are also great enterprise style dialer companies and certainly cost premium. But then you got your consumers that I like to call them. I'll bucket them in the consumer dialer bucket, which will be your Mojo dialer, your Smart dialer. These are companies where you can just buy one seat. It's a power dialer that operates up to 3 to 4 lines, and they're priced much better because they're not necessarily used for large call centers or companies. They're just more for the solopreneur or small to medium-sized business owner. So if you have less than 4 agents, then you must look into a consumer, or I'd recommend looking into a consumer. Now, if you have greater than 5 agents, that's where I'd start looking into the enterprise. And then some factors to consider, right? Which dialer do I ultimately go with? And this is all going to come down to your monthly budget. Naturally, how much data are you looking to target? One caller for us is able to handle up to 10,000 records. So if you're targeting 10,000 records or below, I think going with a consumer is just fine. Even if you're targeting up to 40,000, 50,000 records, and you happen to have just maybe 2 agents going after that data, I still think it's worth sticking with a consumer. And until you reach that threshold of 5 agents and more than 50,000 records, I think you'll be fine with something like a Smart dialer or Mojo dialer. but maybe you ultimately want to start bigger, or you maybe already have an established enterprise business and a large team, and you're just looking to migrate to a new dialer that's going to perform better. Great, move to that enterprise, and that ultimately will determine your choice there. And so these are just some questions to get you thinking about which option works best. Don't want to overcomplicate it. But now we want to go into just some rough KPIs. Going back to thinking, okay, how much do I need as far as data that I need to be targeting? How many agents should I be getting based on how many leads I'm looking to source? So here's a couple metrics that are worth thinking about. For our clients, baseline, one caller is able to target 10,000 cold properties per month by making 1,500 to 2,000 dials a day. Sometimes a little bit higher than that, sometimes a little bit lower, but on average, that's what we tend to see and shoot for. And then we roughly speak to about 100 to 150 people. Same line of thinking there. Sometimes it can be lower, sometimes higher. And then ultimately what we're looking to get out of that is 1 to 3 leads pushed per day. So use this math. Think about how many leads you need to source per month in order to be successful in your market, and then just do the math from there. And then you can start building your budget and plan for ultimately what dialer makes sense, how much data you should be targeting, and what your skip tracing, list costs, and dialer software costs are going to be. So hopefully you're seeing by now how these are all coming together, from the data to the systems, and then lastly we'll finish off with the talent next week. So now that we've got ourselves thinking about, okay, here are my metrics I need to hit, have an understanding of what option I need to pick for dialer based on consumer or enterprise, and now what I need to figure out is what should I be looking for to understand whether or not my dialer is performing at a productive rate. So these are some metrics we can look into. Number one is connection rates. What does connection rates tell us? Well, connection rates are if the dialer is connecting to a legitimate phone number. Doesn't mean someone's picked up. It just means the dialer has connected to a legit phone number. And what that tells us is it highlights the data quality and ultimately the dialer efficiency. So the higher the connection rate, the higher the quality of the list, and ultimately the better the dialer is performing. Contact rate. So contact rate is when we've spoken to an actual live person, okay? Regardless if we've gotten a yes or no or whatever the disposition is, it's just, hey, we've spoken to, out of your entire calls that we've made, this is the percentage of people we've spoken to a live person with. And that really does highlight, in my opinion, it's the most important metric that highlights the data quality and dialer efficiency. Because the more people we speak to in this game, the more leads we can convert. It's a simple math. So next is abandon rate. We're going to talk about what that is a little bit more in depth in a later slide. So I'm going to hold off, but it is a key indicator in dialer performance and a major indicator of compliance and dialer performance as well. Flag phone numbers, we always want to be looking out. Most dialers nowadays will flag a phone number if it's now flagged by the carrier as a spam. So you always want to be monitoring this in order to make sure we're not impacting the agent productivity, because that will lower our connection and contact rates. And then we always want to be monitoring hottest call hours. This was a graphic from our 2023 call report, and this was data we took right from our dialer, and this just shared with us over the course of the day and the week what hours were the best hours for lead conversion rates. That's what those metrics are saying. So during Wednesday at 1 p.m., for whatever reason, that was our highest lead conversion rate time throughout the week. So this data is helpful for us to, of course, continuing to improve and enable the agent productivity by setting them up for success. And systems certainly do that. And this data certainly does that, because it's going to be different for everyone. So just because my metrics tell me this doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the same for your market. But hopefully this is helpful, and you guys can start taking this and start monitoring your dialer a little bit more effectively so that we can get ahead of current problems. So going down just real quick before we go to the next slide is the phone number registry and recycling. We're going to talk about where you can go about registering these phone numbers, but this is what you want to be doing before you kick the campaigns off. Basically getting these phone numbers registered so that the carriers flag this as a real phone number, a legit phone number. And then that ultimately will help to improve the agent productivity. So think about, the majority of people will not take this level of attention to detail before even kicking off their campaign. So this is what's going to help give you a percentage above the competition, or a few percentages of competition above the competition, which goes a long way. And ultimately the goal here is to have a high lead conversion rate. Now here are some best practices. So when we purchase or invest into a dialer, regardless if it's a consumer or an enterprise style dialer. Book a call. This sounds simple, but a lot of these dialers aren't, or dialer companies, they aren't proactive in setting you up with a proper onboarding call. So make sure that you do have that onboarding call met. And then on that onboarding call, you want to be going over a number of questions that we're going to cover in the next few slides, or areas that you want to qualify with them to make sure that they're getting your dialer optimized to be able to, of course, get the best out of these cold calling campaigns. So what you want to do is step one, register every phone number you purchase with the freecallregistry.com link. This will get it registered for the top 3 carriers. And then you can also just do this manually by going to each carrier portal. We just do the free call registry. That seems to do fine for us. But that is step number 1. Step number 2 is when you book this meeting with your onboarding services or your system services, ask them to make sure that your campaign sequences are optimized and organized in order to help increase the best auto follow-up cadence within your dialer. So what I mean by that is when a disposition is set, let's say you speak to a seller and they don't answer, the dialer will automatically set a follow-up campaign, or a follow-up sequence where that lead will be put back into your dialer sometime in the afternoon, or sometime tomorrow, or even twice in one day, depending on what the disposition is. So these rules are automated in most dialers. So I always like to ask the service provider if they could walk me through how the dialer is set up, if are the automated sequences set up correctly, and what do those look like so we can optimize our connections and lead conversions. And then once you've gotten your system set up, what we want to also monitor is campaign throttling. So you'll see here, this is a client example, and most dialer setup systems have this type of visibility into all of your active or deactivated campaigns. And this is for one client. So for the case of anyone watching that's going to be relating this to a business, their own real estate business, and they're not running a call center, just think of this as your company, and these are all of your individual campaigns. And you're going to see the dialer is going to give you insights into the campaign health. It's going to tell you how many rounds it's gone through. So this can really help us when a campaign has been exhausted, it's gone through multiple rounds, we're seeing poor productivity, right? We can avoid a lot of headaches or lack of productivity for our agents by throttling campaigns, deactivating some that aren't working, and maybe keeping the ones active that are performing the best. Or when ones start to become low on the health meter and the lead results are just starting to diminish, now we know it's time to deactivate that. Maybe it's time to start skip tracing the new list. So that's where we also leverage data to help make sure that we're getting the most out of our campaigns and getting rid of campaigns that are ultimately dead. Going on the theme of data analysis, there's so much data that you can gather within the dialer. Here are a couple of things that are helpful as far as what you can leverage in terms of impacting your decision making on your list provider or data provider. So to go further on that, this is a quick disposition summary of one campaign. So in the initial 197 calls in this campaign, we have a 1% lead conversion rate. That's industry standard, good sign. We have low wrong numbers, we have low DNC, and overall, it seems like this list is starting off hot. So that could be a clear indication of, hey, we got a really good list so far. Let's go and figure out what were our filters, where was our list provider, and let's see if we can do more with that provider. Another view is when you upload the list. So this is data from when we've actually kicked off the campaign and what the results were of the campaign to date. This is information that happens before we even before we even kick off the campaign. So this is on the initial upload, and the dialer scrapes the data. It looks for duplicates that we already have in our system, and then it looks for ones that are do not call. So we don't, of course, do not call these folks. And then it looks for bad phone numbers. So obviously the lower in these categories, the better the data provider. I don't have clear metrics on this necessarily. However, if you look at the successful uploads and just look at percentages, obviously the higher the percentage, the worse. Right? That's a little bit of a manual calculation, but you get what where I'm going with that. So all in all, we in my company not only look at the system as helpful from an agent productivity standpoint, but it also helps to share the quality of our lists and data that we're using every time we upload. And that goes again right into the next step, which is agent auditing and productivity tracking. So these are some screenshots, and I'm going to start with the ability to manage and monitor productivity across all of your agents and their working hours. So this may be a little bit blurry, but that is a snapshot of our agents working in real time. So you can see all of the metrics from logged calls to talk time when they're actually making these calls. So of the majority of their hours today, how much of that was spent actually talking to people and on the phone. So that's a good indication of productivity and them getting the best and most out of our agents. And then you can look at things like break times, and we can look at folks that are abusing break time and really look at that for payable hours versus workable hours, etc. So there's specific or custom rather columns that you can make in here that can be done for your business. We've kept the majority, the standard options that they provide, while adding in a few that are custom to our company. But overall, this is a great way for our QA auditors. It's a great way for our cold calling team leaders to be able to monitor our agents as they're doing their work. And what's even cooler is that they can actually see in real time when they're on the calls, and they have a couple different options that they can do, which our team leverages to date. They can listen into the call, so they can just take notes, just make sure that they're taking our coaching and our trainings every week and actually implementing that into their practice. That's a really good indication for auditing an agent and how invested they are in the company and your coaching. You can also whisper. So what that means is you can actually speak directly to the agent, but the caller on the other end cannot hear you, which is crazy, right? So you can actually be that little angel or devil on the shoulder, just sitting there and providing some guidance, just whispering in the agent's ear. And if they're having any issues, or maybe they're a new agent and you really want to help hold their hand along the way in those initial onboarding stages, that's a great tool to help an agent that's getting their first couple calls in on their first week. Then if you feel like the call is going south, or you're really just thinking the agent is botching this, the leader can barge in and actually take over the call and step right in. And then if you ever want to as well, I wouldn't do this necessarily if the agent was on call, but given that we do everything virtually, we run a completely virtual company and we do all our investing virtually, we can just easily call that agent at their home office and just check in with them and see, hey, I've noticed you're off, or I've noticed something's wrong. Is everything okay? And you can just reach out to them directly. Lastly is we have custom scripts for all of our clients. This is actually my custom script for my real estate business. So I have my lead manager's names in here. I have the main points that are important to my team because it's different for me versus my other clients, and vice versa. But how this could relate with you and your team is you may have different scripts for different asset classes. You may have different scripts for different markets. You may have scripts for listing versus wholesale opportunities, etc. So that's a really helpful way of, again, putting and setting your team up for success when they're going to do what is arguably one of the hardest and more grueling jobs, which is cold calling. So we might as well do the best we can between these best practices to set up our team so that they can make the most of their time when they're on the calls. Because, of course, no one wants to be cold callers forever. So here's a quick 5-step setup that you can do to get your dialer launched and optimized literally in a 24-hour period. Number one, once you purchase that dialer, whether it's consumer, enterprise, schedule the onboarding and configuration call. 2, purchase that dialer seat. Get your phone numbers. If you're going to do 10,000 records, I'm suggesting probably having somewhere between 20 to 30 phone numbers per month. That's just my recommendation. Then you want to register those phone numbers with the free call registry. Go ahead, go into your dialer and create yourself a new campaign. In the terms of Ready Mode, it's called a playlist. In Call Tools, I believe it's just a campaign. But you want to create that campaign, upload those leads, and assign that to a specific playlist. And a playlist, that can be a market, a playlist could be an asset class, A playlist could be an exit strategy, right? This is just your way of organizing your campaigns based on what fits your business the best. But being granular in your campaigns will only be a better benefit to you and your team when you go through the data and campaign analysis part to be able to see top performing lists, top performing markets, top performing asset classes. So the better you can organize your campaigns in these playlists or campaigns, whoever the dialer's company is naming it, the easier your team can analyze larger data sets within the business. So make sure you organize your campaigns accordingly. Then you want to go ahead and launch. Now you want to just be monitoring these data points that I had in the previous slide, right? Monitoring those contact rates, abandon rates, connection rates, just looking at those, how those are performing throughout the entirety of the list. And then you want to export that data when it's over and then make tweaks for optimizing your campaigns based on the results you got. So super simple way to get yourself set up for success in 2025. And if you have any questions, reach out to our support channel specifically on dialer maintenance, dialer best practices, and dialer setup. So what are some complementary tools that we use to automate and scale as we wrap up? We've already hit on the power dialer, but again, the goal with that power dialer is to qualify as many sellers that we can in our target market at scale. Next is Zapier. Zapier is our systems integrator that helps to communicate or helps to bridge the gap and enable easier communication and connectivity between our power dialer and our CRM, between our power dialer and our Google Sheets or Google Studios as well for our reporting. So this is as simple as it can get, and this is what allows us to run 30 to 40 agents right now on a power dialer and not have any hiccups. And so we're able to connect these three together. Zapier is the glue that has given us that ability to do so. But really, if you're just starting out and have a smaller team, a power dialer and exporting that data and the reporting to a Google Sheets is more than enough. And if you have that skills or someone that you can hire to help take those Google Sheets and make colorful reporting in Google Studio, both of those tools are free. That could be a good use of time and an investment to have someone hired on Fiverr for a one-time fee. Next is the personnel that we leverage to effectively get ourselves to that 100K. Now, you could just do this with one caller, right? You don't need to have a quality assurance person. You don't need to have a cold calling team lead. You could easily get to 100K of deal revenue with simply one caller, one agent, and not having to have all these different people in the mix. What I'm speaking to here is when you want to get your business to a point where you're creating a $1 million company or a 3-5 deal a month company, and you have multiple agents on your dialer or within your company, and you really need to have a cold calling team lead person or a quality assurance person there to help handle things like dialer maintenance, making sure that they're reviewing leads as they're being qualified in real time by the callers, and then just making sure we're tracking daily and weekly KPIs. And so this is how we have our current setup, or I like to call them like pods, if you will. So we have, of course, the cold calling agents. Their sole responsibility is to just qualify leads and new opportunities for our business and our clients at scale. Anything outside of that, they should not be focusing any time and energy on, other than just getting trainings and taking the feedback and working on their craft, of course. But next, we have a complementary role. It's sort of an in-between role, not necessarily a management person per se, but someone who understands the role of a cold caller, and they what we call a quality assurance auditor. So what they do is, because we are qualifying so many leads in any given day, that their job is to look at the leads, make sure that they fit our buy box, and give a yes or no to see if they're truly qualified. Now, if they're not truly qualified, they get sent back to our lead managers, and the lead managers do some further digging and qualification with the seller. However, if they are deemed as qualified, now they get pushed to our business, or they get pushed to our client, and they get the green light, and now they're ready to be worked on as an opportunity. And now above that person and above all of them in the cold calling department is the cold calling team leader. Now, this is a tenured rep, someone who has been at least in my business, right? These are my roles, and the way I like to grow my company is having everyone start in the cold calling role or that entry level role so that they can really learn the business front to back. And now they know what to look for, and they actually can empathize with these agents when they're giving constructive feedback. So every single cold calling team leader, quality assurance person has always been in the cold calling seat. So naturally, this cold calling team leader, sole responsibility is to lead a team of agents. Typically, we don't try to exceed 10 agents per cold calling team lead. And their job is to make sure they are training and managing these agents, handling things like incidents, feedback loops, monitoring KPIs, both qualitative and quantitative KPI reviews, and just making sure that these agents are growing in the role and that they're satisfied in their day-to-day. And then they work alongside the quality assurance auditor to make sure that they're, giving eyesight onto agents that need a little bit more TLC, a little more help, and that are sort of in a critical state. So that's how we have it structured. It's not to be overcomplicated, but, and again, as I cannot stress this enough, you do not need all these people in order to hit 100K in revenue for cold calling. But this is just as your team grows and scales, you get an idea of what a structure could look like. And so lastly, as we wrap up with probably the driest of all subjects, but one that is extremely important, especially as we go into the new year, which is navigating compliance. I want to be clear, we're going to do a January session on cold calling compliance and marketing specifically. So please show up to that if you have any questions or concerns. That'll be coming in January. However, for the dialer compliance, and since we are on the topic of dialer maintenance and compliance, this is what you can do in order to make sure you remain compliant while you're managing a power dialer. Number one is you have to have an inbound voice recording when sellers call you back. So as a power dialer, as you're aware, it's making anywhere between 3-5 different calls at once when you're depending on how many lines you're running. And when a seller picks up and connects, sometimes sellers are going to connect to an answering machine, or they're going to be directed to just a call being dropped, and it's just going to be dead air. However, when they call back, let's say they missed the call and they don't connect in live, but they do want to call the number back, it will go to a voicemail recording. And on that voicemail recording, you must state your business name. You can not necessarily have to state your name, you just have to state your business name. So if you don't do that, you can be fined and you're out of compliance. That's number one. 2 is keeping your abandon rate less than 5%. Now, there is a little bit of gray area. This isn't necessarily a federal mandate. There's more state-based rules and regulations here. But as standard practice and what was recommended by our provider, Ready Mode, is that we want to keep our abandon rate in any given market and state less than 5%. Because what that will start doing is if your abandon rate spikes up higher, this will negatively impact your reputation with your phone numbers. It'll cause you to have to replace more phone numbers than needed, spend more money in that piece of your business. And then ultimately, too, it's going to negatively impact your connection rate, contact rate, and performance. And so when these abandon rates spike, the dialer slows down because the dialer doesn't want you to go too fast, doesn't want to be having your phone numbers flagged as spam, it doesn't want to be causing interop issues. And so when its abandon rates spike, your dialer starts slowing down and the volume of calls that can be made starts slowing down. And this is going to have a direct and negative impact on campaign performance. So please, within our dialer, we have the ability to set a rule that says it throttles automatically when any campaign or any phone number has reached an abandon rate of higher than 5%. So just keep it always automatically at 5 and throttle it down. So we typically see somewhere around 2 to 3% is where you want to be. That's where we keep my business and our clients at. And then the last, but certainly not least, and probably the most standard, is just always scrub for DNC, always scrub for federal DNC. Most of these dialers already have a connection to FDNC, but as you build your own company, you're going to start having your own DNC internally. People are going to get pissed off that may not be on FDNC, but you certainly need to be tagging, flagging, and marking those records internally for DNC so you do not contact and piss them off and have some sort of letter from an attorney on your doorstep. So this is something that we're going to talk a lot more about. I know there's a lot of questions within the community raised about overall marketing compliance as it hits all marketing channels in 2025 and specifically in the real estate space. We will have more to that coming in our January compliance session. Please join us then. However, please reach out to us and our support staff if you have any questions around setting up your dialer, getting the most out of your dialer, or deciding which dialer makes sense for you and your team. We will see you guys on part 4 next week. We're going to go over A+ player talent and how that impacts the 100K call system hierarchy.